For over a century, the Macedonian phalanx had been the most feared fighting force on earth. The soldiers of Alexander the Great had marched from Greece to the edges of India, crushing every enemy in their path. But in 168 BC, on a plain in northern Greece, a Roman general named Lucius Aemilius Paulus was about to prove that the age of the phalanx was over. What happened at the Battle of Pydna would not only destroy the kingdom of Macedonia, it would change the way wars were fought forever. To understand what was at stake at Pydna, we need to step back for a moment. Macedonia was a kingdom in northern Greece, roughly where the modern country of North Macedonia and northern Greece sit today. At its peak, under Alexander the Great, Macedonia had controlled a vast empire stretching from Greece all the way to Persia and India. By 168 BC, that empire was long gone, but Macedonia was still a proud and powerful kingdom, ruled by King Perseus, the last of the Antigonid dynasty, the royal line that traced its roots directly back to one of Alexander's most trusted generals. Rome, on the other hand, was a republic on the rise. After defeating Carthage and expanding across the Mediterranean, Roman legions had begun pushing into Greece. Perseus resisted. He gathered an army of 44,000 infantry and 4,000 cavalry, determined to drive Rome out of his land. Rome responded by sending one of its best commanders. The stage was set for a confrontation that would decide, once and for all, who ruled the ancient world. Before we go any further, if you enjoy history brought to life like this, consider subscribing to our channel. It helps us keep making videos like this one, and it means a lot to us. Now, let's get back to 168 BC. The Roman force that marched into Macedonia in 168 BC was not the same army that had struggled in previous campaigns. The new consul, Lucius Aemilius Paulus, was a seasoned and disciplined commander, and he had spent weeks reorganizing and sharpening his troops before advancing. Under his command were 2 full Roman legions, reinforced by allied contingents, totaling around 22,000 heavy infantry. These were not just Romans. Among the allied soldiers marched Etruscans and Samnites, peoples who, not long before, had been bitter enemies of Rome for centuries. History had folded them into the Roman war machine, and now they fought under the same eagles. Supporting the heavy infantry were thousands of light troops, including the velites, fast, lightly armed Roman skirmishers, as well as soldiers from the allied kingdom of Pergamon and various Greek allies. But perhaps the most striking element of Paulus's army was its cavalry. 4,000 horsemen rode with the Roman force, including 1,000 riders from Numidia in North Africa, under the command of their own prince, Macedonian. And with those African troops came something that could stop an entire formation in its tracks: 22 war elephants. Perseus, on the other side, fielded a significantly larger force. His army counted 44,000 infantry and 4,000 cavalry. The heart of that force, and its most dangerous component, were the 21,000 soldiers of the Macedonian phalanx. These men fought in an extraordinarily tight formation, carrying the sarissa, a pike nearly 20 feet long. The first 5 rows held their sarissas horizontal, pointed directly at the enemy. The rows behind angled theirs upward at 45 degrees, creating a moving wall of overlapping spear points that could stretch for over a mile. No force in the ancient world had ever broken through a phalanx on flat, open ground. Perseus knew that, and he intended to use it. Perseus was not a reckless commander. When Paulus arrived in the region, the Macedonian king had already chosen his ground carefully. He positioned his army on the western bank of the Elpius River at the foot of Mount Olympus. Yes, the very same mountain that the Greeks believed to be the home of their gods. The river in front, the mountain behind, and the nearby city of Dium providing supplies. It was a strong defensive position, and Perseus had no intention of leaving it. Paulus recognized the trap immediately. Attacking a phalanx across a river, on flat ground, with no room to maneuver, would be suicide. His own soldiers, eager to fight after the humiliation of previous defeats, pushed him to attack at once. Paulus refused. He told his men they would fight when and where he decided, not a moment before. Instead, he devised a plan. He sent a subordinate officer, Publius Cornelius Scipio Nasica, on a secret night march with 3,500 allied troops and 5,000 legionaries. Their mission was to slip through an unguarded mountain pass and strike Perseus from behind. It nearly worked. But a Cretan auxiliary soldier serving in the Roman army defected and warned the Macedonians. Perseus reacted quickly, sending a general named Milo with 2,000 Macedonian soldiers and 10,000 Thracian mercenaries to block the pass. Nasica did not know what was waiting for him, but when he arrived and saw the enemy, he ordered the charge anyway. The fighting in those narrow mountain passes was brutal and bloody. Nasica himself reportedly killed a massive Thracian warrior in single combat, driving his short-throwing spear, the pilum, through the man. The legionaries fought their way through obstinately, forcing the Macedonians into retreat. Perseus, realizing his position was now exposed, broke camp and withdrew toward the plains near the city of Pydna. The Battle of Pydna was about to begin. Perseus pulled back and set his army on a small rise behind a river near Pydna in northern Greece. The terrain was flat and open, perfect for the phalanx. Paulus saw this immediately and refused to advance. He made camp in the hills and waited. His officers, especially Nasica, grew restless and pushed for an immediate attack. Paulus smiled and reminded them what it would mean to send Roman swords against a wall of 20-foot spears on open ground. They would wait for a better moment. That night, something unexpected shifted the mood in both camps. The moon turned dark, its white light fading into a deep blood red. In the Macedonian camp, the reaction was one of fear and despair. Soldiers wept. Some cried out that the gods had abandoned them. A bleeding moon, they believed, was an omen of destruction. But in the Roman camp, the response was remarkably different. A Roman military tribune named Caius Sulpicius Gallus was an astronomer. The night before, he had warned Paulus that a lunar eclipse would occur, and Paulus had allowed him to gather the troops and explain it. Gallus told the soldiers plainly this was a natural, predictable event, nothing more. When the eclipse came, the Romans simply offered sacrifices to their gods and went to sleep. Their morale was untouched. The following day, the two armies faced each other in tense silence. Then, something almost absurd set the whole thing in motion. A Roman mule carrying water broke free from its handlers and wandered toward a stream near the Macedonian lines. Roman soldiers chased it, ran into Thracian troops doing the same thing, and a skirmish broke out over the animal. Messengers raced back to both camps. Perseus saw an opportunity and marched his entire army forward. Paulus, facing a potential mutiny if he refused to fight, ordered his legions to form up and advance. The Battle of Pydna had begun, started by a runaway mule. The Macedonian phalanx lowered its sarissas in unison and moved forward. The first Roman light troops in its path were simply swept aside. A brave auxiliary chieftain named Salvius grabbed his unit's standard and threw it into the phalanx, forcing his men to charge after it and buy time with their lives. It slowed the phalanx slightly, but the wall of spears kept coming. The Roman heavy infantry, the legionaries, watched the carnage ahead of them and began to slow down. For the first time, the Battle of Pydna seemed to be going Macedonia's way. Paulus could see what was happening. His legionaries were slowing, their confidence shaken by the sight of that massive, unstoppable wall of spears grinding toward them across the plain. If they met the phalanx head-on, in open ground, the result would be a massacre. So Paulus did something that required extraordinary nerve. He ordered a retreat. Not a rout, not a collapse, but a controlled, disciplined withdrawal back toward the hills. Thanks to the iron discipline of the Roman legions, the maneuver worked. The phalanx followed, pushing forward in pursuit, hungry for the kill. That decision would cost Perseus everything. As the phalanx advanced across the uneven ground at the base of the hills, something began to happen. Gaps opened in the formation. The sarissa was a devastating weapon on flat terrain, but on broken, irregular ground, the tight formation that made it so deadly began to fall apart. Soldiers stumbled. Spacing widened. The wall of spears was no longer a wall. Paulus saw it from his position on higher ground and immediately rode along his lines, shouting for his men to attack. The Roman centurions needed no further encouragement. They led their soldiers straight into the gaps, fighting the Macedonian pikemen at close range exactly where a 20-foot spear becomes useless and a short Roman sword becomes lethal. At the same time, the Roman unit on the right flank swung around and hit the now exposed left side of the phalanx. The pressure came from multiple directions at once, and the phalanx, already struggling, began to fragment. Then Paulus unleashed his final blow. On the right flank, the war elephants charged, followed closely by the Roman and Numidian cavalry. The exhausted Thracian mercenaries on their path had no answer for the elephants and were torn apart. The cavalry poured through the gap, collapsed the left side of Perseus's army completely, regrouped, and struck the rear of the breaking phalanx. It was over. 20,000 Macedonian soldiers died on that field. 11,000 were taken prisoner. Perseus himself fled on horseback, abandoning his army, his crown, and his royal robes. He was eventually found hiding in a temple on the island of Samothrace and brought before Paulus in chains, weeping. The Roman general looked at him with contempt. The last Antigonid king, heir to the legacy of Alexander the Great, was finished. The kingdom of Macedonia ceased to exist. And from that day forward, it was the Roman legion, not the Macedonian phalanx, that would dominate the battlefields of the ancient world. The Battle of Pydna lasted less than an hour. In that single afternoon, Rome eliminated the last major military power that could challenge its dominance in the eastern Mediterranean. Macedonia, the kingdom that had given the world Alexander the Great and a military formation that conquered half the known earth, was gone. Absorbed into the Roman world, it would never rise again as an independent power. For Lucius Aemilius Paulus, the victory brought enormous honor. The Roman Senate awarded him the title Macedonicus, and he returned to Rome in a triumphal procession that lasted 3 days. The treasures of Macedonia were paraded through the streets. Behind them walked Perseus, still in chains, still weeping. The Antigonid dynasty, which traced its lineage directly to Antigonus the One-Eyed, one of Alexander's most trusted generals, was extinguished forever. But perhaps the most lasting consequence of Pydna was not political, it was military. The phalanx had defined warfare for nearly 2 centuries. Pydna proved, beyond any doubt, that flexibility and discipline could defeat raw formation power. The Roman legion had passed its greatest test. Thank you for watching all the way to the end. It truly means a lot to us. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing and leaving a comment below. We will see you in the next one.